Alright, I know I said that I was done buying radios off of eBay. However, for the past few weeks, months really, I've really been focusing on finding parts I need to fix the stuff I've already got, like knobs, tubes, whatever. This one was unexpected though. This should be a slide-in chassis for that giant, weird, almost furniture-looking Mohawk radio I got. I think it was early last summer, last spring, anyways, about a year ago. So, as one of you suggested, I set up a search on eBay with email alerts for Mohawk chassis. Over the course of the past year, I found a few, but most weren't quite the right style, or more often they were actually in a radio. They were not the slide-in chassis. I didn't want to buy a radio just to dismantle it for the chassis, plus without the right enclosure with front of the radio to slide into the cabinet. It wouldn't have looked right anyways. Well, lo and behold, about 2 weeks ago, somebody was selling one, and he actually even knew that it was meant to slide into a larger cabinet, advertised it as such. I was the only bidder, and I was kind of surprised because it had tubes in it, including a 71A output tube, and I thought somebody would have bought it just for the tubes, but no. Or, somebody would have bid on it at least. This is some weird foam. It's almost like memory foam. You squeeze it and it takes a while to come back. At any rate, it seems to have survived alright. So you can see it's a chassis, but the chassis is in a box, and it's got a front on it with a nice escutcheon, or at least in the ad it looked like it had a nice escutcheon. I think it's just missing one tube, and it didn't look like it was too chewed up. Now this is fairly primitive stuff. We're talking like mid-late 20s, maybe 27 or so. So it's a TRF, tuned radio frequency, and there's no power supply. It's meant to run on batteries or an external battery eliminator, which I would love to find, but I've never seen one of those for sale. Almost looks like a little space heater on wheels or something, where one end plugs into the wall and it's got kind of this funky looking box, and the other end plugs into the radio. Although this is a bit odd to have an AC cord on it, because this definitely does not have a transformer rectifier or anything. Oh, I know what this is all about. I'll show you when I pull it out. I recall seeing in the photos on the eBay listing that it had a toggle switch on the front. It looked to me like somebody did drill a hole in this and add a switch. And this is probably just to switch this cord, which went to an AC adapter elsewhere. So, hopefully I can plug up that hole or something. I guess that would be a grid leak resistor up here, a very early type. I think that's the first time I've ever actually encountered one. I've just seen them in photos before. And then here are the various tubes. So it's a bunch of Type 26s. Remember, I had a lot of trouble finding those for my Brunswick 5KR. I think it's 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 26s, a 27, and then a 71A. Here's a 71A. Hopefully it's good. Not that I expect I'll have this radio up and running anytime soon. My main intent in this video is to give this a look over, take it out of the box, check it out, look underneath the chassis, and then what I really want to do is give it a test fit inside the cabinet and see how it fits and how it looks. Alright, here it is out of the box. Looks to be in very good condition, just like it looked on eBay, other than the addition of the switch, unfortunately. So, how did I know what this radio should look like? Well, that's because I have the original sales info. So, one thing I've got is an original ad from an old magazine. Now, I was wrong a bit about the year. This is actually the 2728 line. This is the radio I've got. And that's how I knew more or less what the radio should look like. Kind of a vague picture though. But even better, I found a copy of the original sales info. At least I think it's original. It might be reproduction, but I don't know. It seems pretty vintage to me. I don't know who would go to the trouble to make a reproduction of this because it's an awfully limited market. And there's their old factory in Chicago, Illinois. So there is my radio. The Spanish Vargueño console, also known as the Seminole. So as you can see, all their radios have Indian names. So the Navajo, I think I've seen a few of these on eBay. That's what I meant by, it was the right type of dial and radio, but it was in like a finished box, not a drawer type that would slide into a cabinet like this one. I think on the reverse, yeah, here we go. So here's a great look at what all the components should look like. So there's the insides of this box. Top side and bottom side. And there's that AC adapter I was talking about. It's kind of like a, I don't know, just like, well, basically a box. Plug it into the wall. This converts the AC to DC and varies voltage levels for the radio and plugs into the radio. So, if I could ever find one of these, that'd be fantastic. In the meantime, if I want this radio to actually work, I'm going to have to replicate something like that myself. I did find a one-page schematic for this on Nostalgia Air. I don't know about finding a schematic for something like that. Be nice if I could. Oh, and finally, there's the speaker. The pyromonic speaker, or pyromonic speaker, which I also don't have, but I think the radio that came with my, or sorry, the speaker that came with my radio is pretty darn cool as it is. Alright, so, something else I really like about this is, in keeping with the Indian motif on this dial, they have these nifty little tomahawks that are hinged. I don't think they serve any purpose, other than just being decorative. Now, at the time, having a dial set up like this, I guess, was very innovative. They called it the one-dial setup. I think prior to that, most radios were strung out horizontally and had several large knobs you have to manipulate. Whereas this, the tuning is just done with one dial, and they have printed on here, one dial. I guess that was a big deal. This says S&L, which I'm thinking might be shortwave and longwave. And the bottom is volume, and this tunes the dial. All a bit rough, so I don't want to mess with the controls too much. I don't want to break anything inside. So let's take a look underneath. Alright, so here's a closer look underneath. And you know, that switch sure does look original. There's a niche cut out for it that looks identical to the one for the volume control. I know you don't see it in the ad, but this radio did come in both AC and DC versions. So this may be from the AC version, and that switch is original. Plus, look at the wiring for it and the way it's stapled in and everything. That sure looks factory to me. Now, as for the rest of it, well, one of the things they boast about in the ad is that it's copper enclosed for shielding, so you can't see inside there, which could also make it fun to work on. Unless, hopefully, if you take off these nuts around, the whole bottom will come off. I'm not sure what this control is for, maybe to control regeneration or something like that. And no doubt a filter cap or two inside that box, and the rest are probably interstage transformers. This one looks a bit nasty. Maybe some rodent was chewing on it, I don't know. Hopefully it's still okay. The wiring looks a bit tenuous too. Just have these fine wires running from transformer to transformer. up into that, which looks like a little capacitor sandwich. So, very, very primitive for sure. Should be interesting to work on at some point. Well, it looks to be in fine shape, even on the sides. It's got nice dovetail joints all around. Hole chute out here that I suspect was done later. Not sure why. There's nothing actually going through that hole, but there it is. Alright, so let's go out to the back porch and check out the console and see if this actually fits in there. Here we are out on the back porch, which is getting kind of crowded again with all those TVs I picked up recently. And here is the radio, which I thought I would have in storage by now, but I just didn't get around to it. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because it gives me a chance to try out this chassis. If you haven't seen it before, I suggest you go back and watch the video from when I got this radio, the All-American Mohawk Seminole radio from 1927 or 28. When I put this into storage, what I really want to do is figure out how to take these legs off. I assume this thing breaks down, because otherwise it's fairly unwieldy. And it's a crazy looking thing. So, big box with some doors and drawers. Put, I don't know, magazines or whatever in here, and same on the other side. Speaker is down below. It's not original, but it is from the right era. And the radio is in the center. It's like a pull-down desk, so you could use this as a writing surface. More cubby holes up here for letters and whatnot. And here finally is a radio, which has Lyric on it. Now, Lyric and Mohawk formed some kind of relationship at some point in the late 20s, early 30s. But inside on the chassis, this does say All-American Mohawk. When they designed these cabinets, I guess the intent was that you could slide out the chassis and upgrade it as radio technology improved. And obviously this does fit fairly well, but as we'll see from behind, there were some modifications made, like some strips of wood added to kind of shim it into place. These knobs are not original, so they don't look very good. But this is a superior radio. It might even be a superhead. It certainly has more tubes, and it's a more modern design, and it's AC. You can plug it right into the wall. But I do like the looks of the older chassis I just picked up a lot better. So I'm going to try to turn this cabinet around, slide this chassis out, and slide the other one in. Luckily, a friend stopped by, so he was able to help me rotate the cabinet around, and it fits great from the back. I have not looked at the front yet. Before I do, I wanted to show you the radio that was in there. So briefly, I'll go over it again. You can see it in the other video too. So this is not as new as I thought. It's probably maybe 1 year newer than the new chassis I got. But this is AC, but it's still a TRF. Uses type 26 tubes, a 27, and a 71A output tube. So it's actually fairly similar. But a few more stages of amplification, so I imagine it has a bit more output power. And there should be a type 80 tube in here. Oh yeah, and there's where the type 80 tube goes. So anyways, so I took that out. And you can see it's much wider. And that was a pretty tight fit in there, whereas this one's got plenty of room to spare. Almost too much room. It's centered like that. So there's no obvious like runners or bracing or any way to mount this. So I don't know how this was originally secured inside the cabinet. I don't see any holes on this box. I don't see any indication of any type of brackets or anything that might have been down here, but of course I could add my own, no problem. So let's see what it looks like from the front. So there's a little bit of a gap on either side. But otherwise, it looked great. Much better than the radio that had been in there. Much more in keeping with the look of the rest of the cabinet. Very happy to have found this. Those gaps, I'm sure I can fill in from behind without too much trouble. Alright, so at some point, who knows when in the future, I'll get around to actually trying to get this thing to work. In the meantime, here's a look at another box that recently arrived. In this box that just arrived via UPS is what should be a 12-inch black and white picture tube, and I just wanted to record this video because I thought this was a very novel way to package it. And I gotta say, not a bad way to go, in spite of how it may look. Much better than a sea of peanuts. The key to shipping a CRT is to have something to brace it so that if the box gets whacked, all the pressure does not hit the base of the CRT. So, the guy that shipped this has these nice struts made out of some pretty tough cardboard. So the funny thing was to whack this box, they pick up the force. And then he wrapped the CRT in what looks to be a blanket of some sort. And that's all you need. I mean, filling in all this space around here with a bunch of peanuts really is not that important, as long as that's braced against the top with these struts. Typically, they originally would have shipped with kind of a grid, like some cardboard like this and this and this and this, with the center being the neck of the CRT. So the seller sold this as untested, unknown. I think it was an estate sale find. I was the only bidder. I guess I was the only one. Maybe silly enough to take a chance on it, but I've gotten lucky a couple times in the past. It wasn't that expensive, so maybe I'll get lucky. Here's a better look at how it was packed, now that I've pulled it outside of the box. So I think all I have to do is slit this plastic and be able to unravel that blanket pretty easily. So here it is, and I assume it's 12LP4. Certainly didn't get damaged in shipping, but I don't like the looks of these getters much, so this may indeed be bad after all, but not because of shipping, I don't think. It might have been bad to begin with. Hey, if nothing else, I got this nice funky blanket out of it. I checked the filament with my ohm meter, and we do have continuity. So, doesn't mean it's not gassy, but maybe there's a little bit of life left. Let's find out. I can see it glowing. If it is gassy, probably burn out before too long, and when I test it, it'll probably glow blue inside the neck. Cranking it up to 6.3 volts. No shorts, no shorts. No cutoff control. But we do have emissions, and they are climbing. And I don't see any blue glow. So, obviously let this sit for a while, and the emissions are well into the good now, so let's see if I have cutoff control. Yes, yes I sure do. So, I mean, seeing a weird discolored getter doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. For one, when they activate these getters, they put like a coil around here and blast it with some radio frequency energy, which can cause it to kind of splatter around. Also, it's a reactive metal to grab any air molecules that got inside the tube during the evacuation process. So if there is a little bit of air in there, its job is to react with it, which can cause it to turn kind of funky looking. But as long as air doesn't continue to leak in and this scrubs it out, then that's a good thing. Let's just do a little life test. I mean, that's about as good as you're ever going to see an old black and white picture tube test. How a new one may not even read that high. Life test, barely budging. Wow, I mean, if this is for real and there really is no air in there, this is like the best 12 LP4 I've got. Which is great because I've got several sets that are in need of one or have really weak CRTs in them, so. Now and then you get lucky. I've taken a few gambles on eBay and picture tubes. Some have been very weak. One of them got busted in shipping. Some have been gassy. You might remember that 16-inch metal picture tube I was struggling with for a while, and it was glowing purple and not going to eventually burned out. No doubt air leaked into that one. But so far, this one looks good. One last thing. Now that I've got the new chassis, I really don't have any use for this one. So if any of you are interested in a Lyric chassis from the late 20s, please let me know. Keep in mind it's quite heavy, so it will cost a bit to ship. But I'd really like to see it go to a good home.